Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. It's a real pleasure. I'm Stephen, and this is my friend and colleague, Ángela. And today we're going to talk to you about a favorite topic of ours, which is power. It's a very big topic. It's certainly a big topic for 10 minutes. So what we want to do is give you a taste of what we have learned about how to think about power and peace building, and hopefully offer a couple of practical examples of strategies that we use to try and bring power sensitivity into our work. So, what is this thing of power? Well, I think often our minds go to the visible aspects of power, and it's a theme of this conference, isn't it? Visible and invisible. So if we think about visible aspects of power, we might think of political leaders, economic leaders, cultural icons, and think of the power that they wield. And we have terms for these things, right? Political power. Or we might think of governments and the rules and policies that they put in place, and how this shapes our lives, how this determines what is possible for us, what we can and can't do. We might think of popular mobilization, people marching in the streets, people power, another aspect of power which is really visible, and people promoting causes that we do or don't agree with. But one of the really slippery and challenging things about power is a lot of its manifestations are actually much more difficult to see. And one that's really critical in peace building concerns violence. Now, violence is visible. We do see it, and it has a big impact upon us. But it's not necessarily the act of violence itself which is so powerful, but the threat of violence, the memory of violence that hangs over people, whole cities, whole populations. And it's powerful because it shapes what we can say, what we can do, where we can go, and it's difficult to grasp and work with. A similar one is around identity, and we might think in terms of structural violence. Now, it can be really visible to the people that experience discrimination and marginalization that this is something that is really impacting them. But it can be quite invisible to those that don't have to experience that. And on the flip side, if your identity, how you look, where you are from, how you identify, if that is a source of privilege for you, that can be very difficult for those that have that privilege to actually see, that they are empowered, that they have agency that others don't. So it becomes challenging to work with. How do we put this all together? Well, there are many definitions of power, but what we have come to use is to see power as the combination of all factors that combine to constrain what we can and cannot do, individually and collectively, how we can think, how we can act, and ultimately how we can realize our aspirations for the kind of lives that we want to live. So it structures all of our relationships. It's often invisible, and it makes it challenging to work with. So does this matter for peace building? Well, let's have a conversation about that. We think it really does matter. And we think it matters because if peace building is about trying to support the people that are most affected by conflict in its direct and structural forms, then these typically are the people that are most disempowered in our societies, most marginalized, least able to actually raise their voices, to act in accordance with their interests. So if we're really going to do peace building in a way that serves the interests of the majority of people that need it, it suggests that we should be power sensitive about how we do it, and maybe be quite intentional about transforming power in the way that we work. So we certainly don't have all the answers for how to do that, but we have a couple of things that we've learned from our experience in Colombia, which Ángela is going to share.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, my name is Ángela. And what I want to show you is if we take this really seriously and begin to believe or understand that power is this gravity field around people that keep us in places where sometimes we don't have a lot of agency, we can bring that understanding into everyday practices within our peace building processes. So we work with the peace councils in Colombia. Those are participative instances that were created after the peace agreement. And they have a lot of expectations on them and a lot of responsibilities. So we arrive, this is one of a lot of stories, just one small, in Cauca, Colombia, to a small town that is about the size of Luxembourg, something like that. And we talked with this peace council, and we told them, okay, this is like a skeleton, like a structure, a pathway, but you're going to do the process as you want. So we invite people to participate. And we open the doors not only for the counselors to participate, but they could invite anyone they want to. And they could decide when they were going to meet, what was going to be the purpose of the process. Like, is it going to be peace? Is it going to be, I don't know, whatever was important for them in that moment. And they decided with whom they were going to work with, and how, and when, and how long was it going to be the process. And when we arrived, they were feeling a little bit confused, like, aren't they like peace building experts? They shouldn't be just like pointing out what we should be improving. Maybe they don't know what they're doing. But they took like a leap of faith and they said, okay, let's go with it. And they just found themselves like recognizing each other in some weird spaces where we as peace facilitators weren't like having the last word. And then we asked them and invite them to create like a map, like under systems action research process. And they were asked to gather and hear others' narratives. They gathered more than 100 narratives from the municipality. And once some of the people that were participating said like, okay, I'm gonna ask the mayor what should we do to build peace. We're saying, okay, go there, but why don't you ask your neighbor? Why don't you ask a child? And they were like, what for? They're gonna make us like lose a lot of time. We were like, why don't you try? And people took another leap of faith and asked their neighbors how peace was built in their own municipality. And they gathered these amazing stories about collective leadership. And then they found themselves constructing, building a collective local knowledge about how peace is built in their society and what actually works and what doesn't. So they were able to recognize their own knowledge, to recognize each other. They were able to point out, for example, that water resources were one of the key and most important things for them. So they gathered together in a small group, not only the people who already knew about water, but the people who had other worries, like young people, women, leaders, around this issue of water, one of amongst others. And they realized that they knew how to build peace. So then they realized that they might need to gather also that understanding to be able to take care of water resources. So they did a mapping of stakeholders in the territory and outside it. And they begin to bring connections. So they begin to build another collective knowledge about that issue that was important for them. And they were also able to recognize others within that map of stakeholders, not just the ones we invited or we get to reach, but others. So they engage in this iterative, like autonomous process of recognizing each other, developing a common language, recognizing that they know a lot, they have resources, and then invite more. And that's what we have been doing in Cauca and in other places in Colombia, and we'll see how far this will lead us, but they have been able to make this network grow and to reach others, like the mayors, the department level, just like growing that power within.
And if we still have a couple of minutes, A couple of things that I want to emphasize is that it's really hard to do work in which all of the decisions about where you're going to work, what you're going to do, what the goals are, what time scale it's going to be, and who's going to participate, to get funded to all those decisions to be taken locally. But if you can get that set up in that way, it unlocks an ownership and an energy for the change which has really good potential. Thank you.